Over the pandemic, I think like most of us, I started experiencing just low energy and sluggishness. So in the beginning of this year, I decided that I would start drinking AG1 every day because I wanted to pay attention and see if it helped. And to be honest, I was skeptical that it would taste good and work because it's this really beautiful bright green. It looks super healthy. But to be honest, it has a mildly sweet taste. That's like the perfect amount of sweet. It's not too sweet because then that would be kind of gross. It actually tastes really good and I look forward to having it every day. Your subscription comes with a year's supply, a year's supply of vitamin D, which is so important to add in when we don't get as much sunlight as we probably should. Vitamin D was a huge game changer for me in terms of my energy and my sluggishness. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. All it is 1 scoop in water. I make sure the water is really cold and sometimes I put ice in it. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. I know I bring mine with me in those fun little travel packs when I go away and I'm not at home. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/noise. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/noise to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
We use the analogy of if I cut myself and I have the right set and setting, meaning I clean the wound edges are approximated, maybe I have an expert look at it, make sure I don't need stitches, the body will naturally heal. And it's the same with the psyche. If we provide the right set and setting and an expert guiding, right, then the psyche will bring to the forefront what needs to be healed, right? And that's not always a pleasant mystical experience, just FYI. Like sometimes it's these challenging experiences that are actually the most productive.
You're listening to Make Some Noise podcast, episode number 464 with guest Anna Verzone. Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you're here. I had COVID, you guys, for the first time, and it's been a few weeks, but I really feel like my voice isn't totally back to normal. During the interview, it was pre-COVID, so it'll be its normal state. But right now, it's still having a hard time coming back. And I guess it just takes a lot of rest and time and lots of water and all of those things that we know that we're supposed to do. I am excited to bring you Anna Verzone. She is someone who I've known forever and has been on the show a long, long time ago. I definitely in the first 100 episodes, I can't remember what number exactly. And I hesitate to put the link in the show notes because I'm like, oh my God. I was still getting my podcast host feet wet, and I get a little like, ugh, with those first 100 episodes. Hadn't really, found my expertise in this arena. But anyway, it's fine. It's fine, right? We all have our first time about stuff like that. And another thing I'm noticing post-COVID, my brain isn't all the way with me. I'm still having a hard time finding the right words. I'm still finding it hard to just have a cohesive thought and all of those things. So it was my first time with COVID. It was my first time. So I'm being gentle with myself. Y'all, there are still, I think, 2 spots left in our September retreat, headed out to Asheville, North Carolina, doing the Daring Way curriculum. If you want to join us, head on over to andreaowen.com/retreat. All the information is there for you. So you can grab one of those last few spots. And let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. Anna Verzone is a master life coach, altered states guide, and host of the Rebel Buddhist podcast. She is devoted to helping yogis and wannabe Buddhas create an unconventional life of true freedom inside and out. She has over 21 years of experience as a nurse, midwife, and professor. Anna received a doctorate in nursing, 2 master's degree, a degree in clinical psychology, certification in applied positive psychology, and a postdoctorate in psychiatric mental health nursing from Johns Hopkins University. She has also completed fellowships in psychedelic assisted therapy. And finally, Anna has been a mentor to adventurous women like you for over 23 years. So without further ado, here is Anna. Anna, welcome back.
Thank you. I know it's been a minute.
Okay, so I was looking because I'm like, I know I've had her on before. When was it? You were episode 37, and now we're well into the 400s.
Holy crap.
You were like top 50. Like that's how far we go back. Oh, I should have had you on sooner, but no, here we are. And I'm excited about the topic because I probably said this in the first episode that you were on, that I think out of all of my colleagues, I think you have the most certifications and degrees and trainings of anyone.
Yeah, that could show how deeply embedded imposter syndrome has been in my life. But yeah.
You are the consummate student. Your bio is so long, and I love that about you. And so we went back and forth like, well, what do you want to come on and talk about? Because there's so many different topics that you are an expert on. So we settled on psychedelics and spirituality. So, okay, you know what I'm selfishly curious about? What brought you here? Like what made you like wake up one morning and be like, you know what? I want to train and learn and get certified in this particular work.
I love that question because I've actually been interested in psychedelics for decades, right? Like my first experience with psychedelics was when I was 15. I did LSD when I was 15 and it really changed my life. And I had, in the sense that at a very young age, I had an experience where I realized the way I perceive the world might not be how it actually was. Mm-hmm. And that how my perceptions went through a bunch of filters and how there was more than what I was capable of seeing at the time. And just kind of, you know, when you're that impressionable of an age and are told that like the world as you see it may not be as it really is, and you continue to question that for the rest of your life. I mean, here I am a life coach, right?
Right.
It's sort of like this is what we do. We're like, hey, how you think about things may not be how it actually is. And it doesn't have to stay that way. So over the decades, I'd always had personal interest in it. And then as I got more into mental health, I would start to become more aware of how many of my patients had, because I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner as well, had an existential crisis at the core of a lot of their suffering. Sort of like, why am I here? Why me? Like, why am I important in this world? What is my purpose? And as I started exploring some of the research, you know, I'm a practicing Buddhist, so I've been meditating since 1993. And a lot of actually Buddhist practitioners have a long history with psychedelics. And I started kind of diving down that rabbit hole and realized that Stan Grof was married to Roshi Joan, who's a Zen Roshi. And I was discovering, wow, you know, psychedelics actually have had a big role in mental health for a very long time before they were made illegal. And then I sort of saw on the horizon that they were going to become legalized for mental health at some point because they were so effective and because we're really failing, you know, our mental health patients right now in many ways. And I decided, you know, I want to be at the leading edge of this. I want to start getting trained in this so that I can bring this to people as soon as it's available. And there's also other countries that I've gone to and led retreats in where it is legal, and states where some are legalized and whatnot. And so, but my personal interest really goes back to the use of psychedelics as entheogens. So psychedelics are a class of psychoactive substances that can change our perception, our mood, our cognitive processes. They affect our senses, the way we think, our sense of time and emotions. But entheogens are a substance that are typically of plant origin that are taken to produce a non-ordinary state of consciousness for religious or spiritual purposes. And that's where I was like, wow, that is where I really find my own personal interest lying, because there's so much potential there and a whole lot of history in many different land-based cultures, indigenous cultures, with the use of psychedelics for spiritual purposes.
Mm-hmm. I didn't realize there was categories and subcategories. Like I thought it was just like, all psychedelics like LSD, ecstasy, ayahuasca, mushrooms. Like I thought it was all just like piled in together. But from what you're saying, it's not that simple.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also atypical psychedelics like, MDMA is kind of thrown in there, but it's not a classical psychedelic, MDMA or ecstasy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people felt that cannabis wasn't a true psychedelic, but now we're seeing it does have psychedelic properties. So yeah, there are different categories, but mostly like with the entheogenic application, it's more what's your intention with its use, and is it for spiritual purposes? Then we can kind of put that in.
Okay. So yeah, like let's talk about mental health for a little bit. Like what do people typically, maybe it's two questions. Like what do people typically seek out psychedelics for? And like, okay, minus 15-year-olds doing it in 1993, right? At a punk concert or whatever. Versus like people who, that are into personal development. Like what are they actually looking for when they make the decision to do that? And second part of the question, or separate question, is it mostly for mental health? Like they're looking for some kind of solution to a mental health challenge they have?
Yeah. So, the research, that was done in the earlier decades, like in the 60s in particular, and early 70s, and even into the 50s in some countries. Like it was really helping us gain insight into how the brain works. It was like, whoa, are we basically mimicking psychosis? And can this information help us treat it, for example? But then, as some people may or may not know, the research got kind of cavalier, a bit cowboyish, and then made illegal at one point. But there was a strong body of research that showed great benefit with specific psychedelics in specific contexts for things like treatment-resistant depression, addiction, like substance use disorders. And so there is a difference between recreational use and intentional use. So when you are participating in recreational use, you often don't have control over the purity of what you're getting. I mean, there are organizations now like Dance Safe, which have kits that you can order to help test if your product's actually tainted with anything or contaminated with anything. But recreational use, we don't have as much control over the dosing, over the purity, and over the environment, right? Oftentimes when you hear about these bad trips, it's in this context of a poorly controlled environment, social stressors going on. And so in an intentional use, there's a very different environment where, it's not the goal isn't to just have a good time. And I want to say there's nothing wrong with wanting to have a good time. Like there's no judgment about that. But in terms of what is intentional use, So in terms of ketamine, for example, that has been approved by the FDA for treatment-resistant depression. And some of this
Isn't that a horse
research that is going
tranquilizer? I
on.
thought that was a horse tranquilizer and it's like not for human
So
use.
ketamine, when I was an ER nurse, we used it for conscious sedation for resetting bones and things like that in the
Uh-huh.
ER. And so when I heard about it being used for mental health, I was like, really? Um, but what was interesting was, yeah, when they were using it for conscious sedation, people with depression would notice an improvement in symptoms. And so
Mm,
that's what's kind of happening right now. Like the research with psychedelics has to choose a very sympathetic population, right? So right now, war veterans with PTSD, as well as end of life
mhm.
studies. And so people are like, okay, we have a high sympathy for those populations. We'll let psychedelics be studied in those populations. But as the research has been so promising, it's now expanding out to depression and anxiety.
I've seen some of the studies on it. I've looked for them actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah, and
lot.
there's actually really great potential with, for example, like neurodegenerative diseases,
Mhm.
because of the potential for psychedelics for neuroplasticity, like growing, new neuronal
Mhm.
connections, which is amazing. Not many things can do that, and with autism even, and so many amazing potential benefits. So people come, for many reasons. My clients often come with more of an existential crisis or intention of wanting to find out, what is their purpose on this planet? Like, why
Mhm.
am I here? Even if, I've had clients even who are like surgeons or midwives or coaches, and they feel like, yes, I kind of have an idea of what I'm supposed to be doing, but it doesn't feel like mine, like my unique purpose. And that
Mhm.
can actually create a lot of existential angst for people,
Right.
and more than we're willing to admit as a culture. We have no rites of passage, for example, that in the West that many
Yeah.
other cultures do. The rite of passage is getting your license, you're getting to drink alcohol. It's sort of like, really, this is our rites of passage. Yeah. So when you are in an intentional setting, you many of you may have heard of like set and setting. So that's the mindset of the client coming in, the mindset of the practitioner or the guide, what they're bringing to the table, what their expectations are, what their fears and anxieties might be. And then the setting, if you've looked at most of the psychedelic research settings, they're very home-like environments. They're not like in a very clinical,
Mhm.
sterile environment.
Mhm.
They try to make it as homey as possible and comfortable. It's a controlled environment. Like with my clients, I'll be like, is there anything in the room that might be triggering? Let's move it. Let's change it. We want it to be a really safe space for clients, right? And then we also want to think about the skill set of the guide. So now we've gone beyond set and setting and realized, hey, there's also the skill set of the guide that can handle when challenging experiences come up, or that can read a client's experience, because some people may not be talking but be struggling, and being able to pick up on that, and awareness of the different medicines. So that's the next thing. Like, is the substance the correct substance? So different psychedelics have different qualities. So I think the future of it's going to be, well, what's your intention and which medicine is suitable for that? Like
Mhm.
lends itself really well to existential crises, which is why it's one of my favorites. And the research at Johns Hopkins, where I did my postdoctorate program, is showing really great results with existential crises in people with terminal diagnoses or end of life. And we can see how this applies to people without terminal diagnoses. Like, don't we all have existential
Yeah,
crises at
eventually.
some
Yeah.
point? Right.
Get to
And
midlife and you
so,
if you haven't had one yet, we'll save you a seat.
right. And then the dosing matters. Like, what dose is it at? Is that appropriate for the intention? For example, the ketamine assisted therapy doses, those are relatively low, so that
Mhm.
you are able to talk during it and have a therapy session during it, versus a full-on psychedelic experience that's very internal, right?
So the psilocybin, that's mushrooms, correct?
Right.
And I know
Yes.
that's a
Magic
very broad
mushrooms,
term.
shrooms.
Yeah.
Yes,
That there's lots
exactly.
of
Thank you.
different kinds of mushrooms. My experience, I've never done any kind of hallucinogenic like LSD or MDMA. And to be honest, because I'm an addict, I'm glad that I didn't, especially ecstasy. Like, I think I really would have fallen in love with that a little bit too much. I did mushrooms in the early 90s, mid 90s, and I had really great experiences with it. Some of the best times I had with friends were on mushrooms. I have no idea where we got them. Like I was a teenager. Well, yeah, I was like an older teenager. But honestly, but I understand. I love what you're talking about. Like, get a kit that tells you what you're getting, where you can test it, or do it in the right setting if you have the resources and the means to do that, because you could be getting anything, really. I don't know. Are there bad mushrooms? Like, does such a thing exist?
Yeah. So I think that's a really good question. And, with mushrooms, they should be prepared correctly, because if they're dried inappropriately, you can have toxic molds on them and whatnot.
Okay.
Right? But there's also different types of mushrooms, like some where, somebody who's psychedelic naive could take in a big mushroom with a cap and be fine, and other ones where they're so much more potent. So you do want to know, like, well, what kind is this? And, what can I expect and how much should I take? Like, that's ideal. Right. But the other thing I want to emphasize that you sort of mentioned here that's different in the intentional setting is the integration. Like, what's the situation after the psychedelic experience? Because you can have a very powerful experience, but is it changing how you act in day-to-day life? Is it changing how you show up in relationships? Is it changing how you run your business, how you raise your kids, how you treat yourself when you have a hard time? And that is, I think, where we see a lot of great benefit with this structure. Like, how I do not, a lot of people email me and they're like, can I just come? I don't want to do your whole 6-month program. I just want to have a guided trip. And I'm like, no, because
that sounds like you just want to get high. No. Like, come on. Like, yeah. You want to safely get high.
Well, and some people think that that's all they need. Like, I just want to have an amazing experience because
solve all my problems.
So powerful. Yeah. But I watched this one ayahuasca documentary, and this guy who did regular ayahuasca retreats, he came back from one. The cameras are like following him to his house. And he's like, oh my gosh, it was amazing. He's talking to his wife. He's like, oh, babe, I had the most amazing experience. Oh, this is just going to change everything. And he goes into another room and they kind of pan to his wife and she rolls her eyes and she's like, I've heard that before.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
it's like you can.
He was on a retreat high.
Yeah. You can have these amazing experiences, but if you don't have like an integration coach or an integration therapist like guiding you, it's probably not going to make it into your day-to-day life. Ultimately.
I see what you're saying.
That's when we get people wanting to go on experience after experience after experience after experience, and then that is more of an escape, right? That's more of a, I don't want to deal with life. Like, I've had clients who have a history of alcohol use disorder, and they've been questioning, like, well, should I do psychedelics? And like, is this not a good idea for me? And what I'll say is I screen very carefully. I work with their sponsor, and it's very clear, like, this is on my terms. Like, I'm telling them like how we're going to do this. And I know very well, just because of my experience, like, are you wanting to do this again or, now just to get high and escape? Or is this a step in the healing? Right. Because like, if you're like, my opinion is, my personal experience as well, is like, if you have a psychedelic experience that's integrated, most of the studies show you need 1, 2, maybe 3.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, and if you're actually integrating, and that doesn't mean you can't do it more often if you want, but you shouldn't need to.
You shouldn't need to. Okay. There was, we really like David Letterman's show. I think it's on Netflix. My next guest needs no introduction. And he had Will Smith on, I think in the last season. And I don't know, Will Smith might've written about this in his book. I haven't read it yet, but he talks about going on ayahuasca retreats, and he went 15 times. And I was like, why? Like, that was my first that came out of my mouth. And I'm like, what did you not get the previous 14 times or do you just have like so much money? You're like, you know what? I am going to go do this thing because I want to run away from my life. But I get what he's saying, because I think I probably talked about this on the podcast before a couple of years ago, or maybe it was over COVID. I can't remember. There was a documentary where they were it must have been a different documentary than you were talking about, but they were documenting some people who had gone on some ayahuasca retreats. Most of them had a great experience. I think there might have been like one person who was having a struggle. But I saw that and then I started thinking about doing it myself. And I'm like, I want to go and have this like magical spiritual experience. Like, I want to go do this. And I was talking to one of my friends who's also in recovery. And then I realized shortly after, and I'm like, you know what? It must have been over COVID, because that's when my mental health took a shit. And I told her, I think I just want to get high. I think I just want to run away from my life. And so now all this time later, and I've looked into it, obviously I'm having you in the show. I'm still looking into it and talking to people who are in recovery, who have used psychedelics for trauma healing. And I can honestly say now that I'm leaning way more on the side of, and I like that you say that, like 3 times max of, yes, people in recovery can do it. So all this to say, I would be looking for some like spiritual healing, because there's still some stuff. Exactly. And I would also be lying if I said like, oh, I don't care at all that I get a chance to like run away from my feelings for a little bit. But I also know that like, I might think I'm running away from my feelings, but I'm probably running straight into the belly of the beast.
Yeah.
So it's all of those things. It's all of those things. I just have to be incredibly honest with myself about my intentions. I'm interrupting this conversation to bring you a few words from some of our sponsors. So the other day I was on Facebook, and this colleague of mine is approaching 40, and she was like, okay, everyone, tell me your skincare. Like, what are your creams and lotions that you swear by? And I said, save your money and just get a prescription for tretinoin. And that's it. It's the holy grail. And she asked me to talk more about it. And so I was telling her about tretinoin, and more specifically Night Shift, that I get from Dear Brightly. So Night Shift is a dermatologist formulated tretinoin serum tailored to your skin by doctors online. And what I wanted to do is just have better texture on my skin, and also even out my skin tone, which actually it even has helped my fine lines that I wasn't expecting. But bonus, I will take it absolutely positively. Tretinoin is the only FDA-approved retinoid to treat photo aging, which is premature skin aging due to long-term sun exposure. And as someone who spent 36 years in San Diego, I had a lot of sun exposure. It can only be acquired through a prescription, and it's one of the most well-researched ingredients with over 50 years of research behind it. Yay. It takes some time to see results. It's not super quick. It took about a month for me, but now that I'm about 3 months in, I'm still seeing results in a positive trajectory. I'm super happy with how my skin looks. It's super easy. You start by sharing your skin story online. Then a doctor will evaluate your skin and skin history. They'll tailor a formula and write a prescription if applicable. Your tailored tretinoin serum will be delivered to you in the mail. It's as simple as that. So go to dearbrightly.com and enter promo code NOISE. This is the exact stuff that I use. And you get 15% off your first order, which is the best offer that you can find. It's NOISE to get 15% off your first order at dearbrightly.com. A few months ago, I had a new client, and in one of the first sessions, he was talking about the struggle of meal planning and prepping and cooking and all of that. And so I recommended Green Chef to him, and he loves it so much that it was like the 3rd week that they were doing it. He sends me a video and he's singing, "It's Green Chef night. It's Green Chef night." And so now every time we have Green Chef, I sing that to myself. You're welcome. Now it's probably going to be stuck in your head. Green Chef's expert chefs curate every recipe so you can have restaurant quality dishes at home without compromising on flavor. I always say I feel like I'm eating at a fancy restaurant when we cook Green Chef, because it's not anything I would have found on Pinterest cooked. It's super delicious. I feel like it's super fancy. And Green Chef saves you so much time by cutting down on all that weekly meal planning, the prepping, the grocery shopping, all of that. Way easier. They have seasonal produce, premium proteins, and organic ingredients you can trust. Green Chef is the #1 meal kit for eating well. Go to greenchef.com/noise135 and use code noise135 to get $135 off across 5 boxes plus free shipping on your first box. That's greenchef.com/noise135 and use code noise135 to get $135 off across 5 boxes plus free shipping on your first box. And then you can DM me on Instagram and saying, it's Green Chef Night, it's Green Chef Night, and I will sing it to you back.
I was just thinking, wouldn't it be funny if with our coaching programs, we were like, and you have to do our mastermind 15 times? Like, people would be like, what's wrong with it that I have to do it 15 times?
Isn't the point so I get better and I don't have to do this anymore? Like,
yeah. I just want to clarify, and I so want to make this clear to everyone. I don't believe that psychedelics are necessary for spiritual growth.
They're not for everyone.
I mean, they are not for everyone, and you don't need them. Like, I've been meditating since 1993. Oh my God, that's like almost 30 years now. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I've met meditation practitioners, I've had Tibetan teachers, and I've met people who have gotten there without anything. And here's what I do know. So I like to describe psychedelics like this. So our brain is sort of a fresh snow hill, and we're born with this fresh hill of snow, and we start taking a sled ride down the hill, right? We make all these decisions, we choose our thoughts, we go down different paths down the snow hill, but eventually we start taking the same paths a little more frequently. And then eventually some of them are deeper grooves, such that if we're in our sled and we're trying to go down a different way, we're going to eventually like go into the deeper groove again. It's like, it's so hard to take a different path, even if we want to. But psychedelics are like a fresh snowfall. They fill in those grooves and help make taking a different path, a different perspective, different choices a bit easier because of having provided that fresh snowfall. And they also provide, so the way I really see it with spiritual practice is there is no shortcut to anything, y'all. We've figured that out by now, right? Mm-hmm. Can we all agree in that 400th whatever episode that there is no shortcut to anything? And so psychedelics sort of provide a glimpse of the top of the mountain. It's like a helicopter ride to the top of the mountain so that you can see the view and you go, oh, this is what it's for. This is why I get on my cushion and meditate. This is why I prioritize getting good sleep. This is why I make my mental health so important, because this is what's possible. And when you see it and have a visceral experience of it and know it's true, because you feel it as a knowing, not as like you're watching a movie and maybe it's true. It's like, this is so true. That makes the commitment to your daily spiritual practice, to your personal growth, that much easier to commit to. And so I think, the escape to that can be beneficial in the sense of it is an escape, but like you said, it's running into the belly of the beast of truth. Yeah. And you get there and you see the truth, and that can be so powerful.
You said it much more lovingly than I did. Same.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell us about the quote unquote hard work that you talk about, where you can really get the benefits, or, have that spiritual insight that you talk about. Like, what else is there? Probably talking about like after you use psychedelics or even during the experience of psychedelics, like what else needs to happen?
Yeah. So we're not, I think what this is lending itself to in terms of the process to integration, right? So this is why, if you look at all of the psychedelic research or most of the psychedelic research, it's a medicine session. So the psychedelics are often called medicine. So the medicine session, and then 3 integration sessions, and then another medicine session and 3 integration sessions, and then maybe a third. The only ones where they've been shown that maybe just one is necessary is with end-of-life clients with end-of-life anxiety, and just one episode can really help to alleviate that. So I think that really goes to show, and any patient that's been through a psychedelic study will say, this is not a panacea. Like, you still need to go to therapy or get
Yeah.
coached or have that integration. You still need to make those difficult decisions and have those challenging conversations in your
Hmm.
life and take those risks. And for me, for my form of spiritual practice, like meditation is a big part of it. Going on retreat is a big part of it. So prioritizing that. And during a psychedelic session, some people might have ideas of, because of their recreational experience. Well, like, so I'll be running around on the beach. Like, so on, if we're doing it in Hawaii, am I running around on a beach and like swimming naked with dolphins and stuff? And it's like, first of all, no, like that's not what's happening. It's a very safe environment. Usually people have on an eye mask, they're listening to music, they have a blanket, and it's a very internal experience. And I may ask questions because we will have done significant preparation and screening ahead of time. So that's the other thing. Like we said, psychedelics are not for everyone. You have, like, I believe in appropriate medical and psychiatric screening because there are contraindications and there's conditions for which they're not going to help. So, like, let's
Okay.
not pretend they are. And so, but so then during the session, we're having potentially, sometimes it's very quiet, but sometimes we're having some conversations at certain points in the journey. But really, we're trusting what's known as, the inner healing wisdom. So that's a big part of psychedelic guiding, is helping the client trust their inner healing wisdom. And as a guide, not getting all in it and being like, I'm going to save the day. Like,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
client's inner healing wisdom is what will bring what they need to heal to the forefront. Like, we use the analogy of, if I cut myself and I have the right set and setting, meaning I clean the wound edges are approximated, maybe I have an expert look at it, make sure I don't need stitches, the body will naturally heal. And it's the same with the psyche. If we provide the right set and setting and an expert guiding, right, then the psyche will bring to the forefront what needs to be healed, right? And that's not always a pleasant mystical experience, just
Right.
FYI.
Hmm. Right, right, right.
Like,
There's like
sometimes
vomiting
it's
and
these
yeah.
challenging experiences that are actually the most productive. And then so the hard work is the integration after. And, in my case, sticking to your meditation practice, even when it feels boring and difficult and challenging. Yeah.
Hmm. Do you ever come across a case where, I'm sure this probably happens, because I I had a doctor tell me once that I was medication resistant when like two antidepressants weren't helping me. I have a feeling it's because I actually have a thyroid issue and not and wasn't actually depressed. But anyway, I know that there are some people who that kind of becomes their quote unquote official diagnosis. They are medication resistant and they walk away feeling so incredibly defeated, like they're broken.
Mm.
And I can assume that for many, psychedelics would be kind of a last resort, like this Hail Mary, if you will. Cause it is, I think, for many, especially living in a culture where a lot of these drugs are still illegal in many states, it's a little risky. So I'm all this lead up. My point is, like, I'm assuming there are people who are like, okay, if this doesn't work, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I feel like this is kind of my last resort. But so do you have people where they walk out of these experiences saying, that was a really fun high, but I don't feel any better? I mean, given that they've
Yeah.
done some of the integration, like where it just doesn't really stick, if you will.
Yeah. So, there is a difference between my mental health patients and then the ones coming for the more purpose driven goals in the sense of the treatment approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I have clients that have come with the diagnosis of treatment resistant depression, first I like to remind everyone and everyone listening, like, medications can be life saving and amazing and powerful, and they actually don't work very well.
Yeah.
Considering, like, maybe we'll see like quantitative differences in a measurement, but is it clinically relevant? Like, are they actually happier in life? Are they actually
Mm-hmm.
like feeling better?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we just looking at points on a scale that's statistically significant, right? So we are, like I said in the beginning, miserably failing mental health patients with our medication approaches right now. And Yes, I have seen clients come for ketamine assisted therapy because that is what is legal and covered by insurance right now, who very much struggle with coming to into complete remission, right?
Hmm. And by
And there's
legal and
so
covered by insurance, you mean just in the United States?
in just in the United States and in
Okay.
all 50 states.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So because in some states, maybe it's not covered by insurance, but you could use psilocybin or you could use cannabis for example. So I have seen clients with that, but I think we have to remember in medicine we generally use this concept of the rule of thirds. Like any treatment or any patient or client of yours, a third are going to be like, "Oh my gosh, that was amazing. It solved all my problems." A third are going to be like, that was pretty cool. It did
Yeah.
help. It didn't make
Hmm.
it go away completely, but it was pretty good. And a third are going to be like, not for me, or it didn't do anything. And I think that's true of anything that works, which is beautiful, which is why we have so many different medicines, so many different kinds of practitioners. And I have, so that's why I feel like screening is really important because I don't want to tell a patient, hey, this is going to really help if it's not, or if I
Yeah.
don't think it will. And I just also want to preface if you have the mindset of this better work or I'm screwed, that is a lot of pressure
Right.
for
On
you, for
yourself,
the
on the practitioner.
medicine.
Yeah. Hmm.
Right. And it's really important to work on that before actually even having the session. It's like, okay,
Okay.
wait a minute. Like, and so, that's why I involve, at least a month of preparation before we even have the medicine session, because we have to talk about all those things. What are our expectations? Because the reality is they're probably not screwed if it doesn't work, but like let's talk about that.
Hmm.
And let's go there. So with the ketamine, yeah, we have preparation sessions and all of that. I will say from the existential mystical experience perspective, the rate of quote unquote failure is a lot lower because
Okay.
we have shown many studies show that people that especially psilocybin at a specific dose can lead to reliably to a mystical experience. And the studies on spirituality and psilocybin have shown that like clients that have had that mystical experience do show sustained benefits in their spiritual practice and in their
Hmm.
spiritual life, including how others perceive them, which I think is huge because so much of this could be like, yeah, I think I'm amazing now.
Hmm.
And like in that documentary, the wife's like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
But a lot of the more recent studies are actually assessing people's community members, like their family members or
Oh,
friends. And they're like, has this person actually changed? And we're seeing really good results with that, which I think is pretty courageous to include in our
yeah.
work.
That's exciting that the research is expanding so much. And I noticed when I looked into it, it seemed to be predominant in a handful of states throughout the United States. And there wasn't a whole lot near me. I think there might have been like one at Duke University, but I didn't qualify or something like that. So I'm glad that it's expanding. This has gone by so fast and we are out of time, but
Oh my gosh.
I wanted to ask you, I wanted to give you one more opportunity. Like, is there anything that we didn't touch on where you were like, I cannot walk away from this conversation without saying this one thing?
Yes.
Okay.
So what I really want to impress on everyone really is, the reason we talk about these things, the reason we do this work is, and we talk about, end of life anxiety, existential anxiety. And the reality is, I think all of us know at some level that we're all going to die and we
Hmm.
don't know when.
Right.
We don't know when. We can pretend if we drink our green juice and exercise that we're extending life, but we don't actually know that. Shit
Right.
happens all the time. And so, like, really, I just want to impress that, if you're feeling that, if you're having that urgency of like that awareness, instead of having it be a depressing thing or a downer, it's like that can be used to fuel your life to not put shit off anymore. Like if you're interested in this, go explore it, go investigate. If you're wondering these things, the time is now because
Hmm.
we don't know when. And there is a balance between planning for the future and fully living in the present. And it doesn't mean we chuck out planning for the future, but to really embrace the preciousness of this life because we have no idea how much longer we're going to be here.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much, my dear. This could have been like a 3-hour conversation. I'm going to have you back on. All of the links are in the show notes to Anna's site. And tell everyone what's the best place to find you these days?
Yeah, well, I'm the host of the Rebel Buddhist podcast, so you could check that out. And the program I'm talking about is adventuremastermind.com. So if you want to explore that program, but otherwise, yeah, come and have a listen to the pod, or myname.com, annaverzone.com has all the things.
All the things, all the topics on all of your certifications
Free
and
stuff,
PhDs and all that
kind of stuff.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, my dear listeners. Thank you for sharing your time with us and sticking with it. I value your time so much, and I'm so honored that you choose to spend it with my guests. And I was going to say me. I'm like trying to get my grammar correct.
Good for you.
My guests and I. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now. Hi there. Swinging back by to say one more thing. You know how I'm always giving advice over here on the show and on social media. And a couple of those things is that I'm always telling you to ask for what you want, be clear about it, and also ask for help. So I am taking a dose of my own medicine, and I'm going to do that right now. It would be the absolute best and mean the world to me if you reviewed and subscribed to this show, Make Some Noise podcast, on whatever podcast platform of your choice. And even more importantly, it would matter so much if you shared this show. Sharing the show is one of the few ways the podcast can grow, and that also gives more women an opportunity to make some noise in their lives. You can do that by taking a screenshot when you're listening on your phone and sharing it in your Instagram or Facebook stories. If you're on Instagram, you can tag me at Hey Andrea Owen, and I try my best to always re-share those and give you a quick thank you DM. And also you can tell your friends and family about it. Tell them what you learned. Tell them a really awesome guest that you found on the show that you started following. Whatever it is, I appreciate so much you sharing about this show.